So we are here with David Brodeur. Do I pronounce your surname correctly?
It's so close. It's right there. Brodeur.
Brodeur.
Yeah, I mean, you got it.
Is it
You got
French?
it, you know. It is French,
Okay.
yeah.
So welcome, David.
Yeah.
David is also known as Locked and Loading on Instagram and other social networks. He creates incredible 3D artworks, animations, illustrations. Seriously, we love his work. We've been featuring him many times because it's very inspiring. So it's a pleasure for me to interview David today, discuss his process of work, what inspires David, and lots of other things. So, David, first question, what does locked and loading mean? How did you come up with this name?
You know, I kind of just wanted like a play on words, more or less, you know. So like there's like an expression, locked and loaded, and that means like you're ready to fire, ready to go. And so I thought, you know, how could I bring this into the digital world and changing the loaded to loading instead, and you know, just kind of something catchy and the double L's, and that's really it. You know, it's just kind of
so
playing.
was it like the first choice, and you're like, okay, this will be my name from now on?
No, I had a bunch of random other ones. I was like, should I go with like what my nickname is, or should I go with, you know, I was scrambling around a bunch of different stuff, and I'm like, well, if I do my nickname and I want to transform what I do into a business, it'd be kind of weird to be named just my name or my nickname or something like that. So I was like, I'll come up with something that could be potentially a company name in the future. So,
okay, fantastic. So let's start from the very beginning. When you started this creative path, you studied fine art, as far as I know. Is this correct?
I was in graphic design. Well, I guess, yeah, I mean, from early age, you know, I started off just drawing and painting and things like that, yeah.
Brilliant. And then how did you decide to move to 3D? What was the path?
Well, it's kind of just a natural progression because, you know, I think I was probably like the last wave of generation to where like motion graphics wasn't, or motion design wasn't actually a thing yet. Like you couldn't go to school for motion design when I went to school. So it kind of just happened out of finding my way through kind of my own passion. You know, I was into graphic design, and then I wanted to start making my work move, and then I jumped into After Effects, and it went from 2D graphic design, making things move, and then I wanted to add depth and dimension to everything, layering things one pixel back in space. To a certain point, I was like, okay, I need to just learn 3D software, and then I picked up Cinema 4D, and so it's kind of just like a natural progression, but it was really just me discovering what my passion was. It wasn't like I saw it in a catalog and was like, that's what I'm going to do. You know, it was kind of.
Did you see any artists that inspired you that you thought, oh, I really want to do that thing, but I don't know how?
No, not in 3D. Well, I mean, I do that all the time now, but at the time when I wanted to learn 3D, no, that wasn't really the case. It was the case for a lot of more like traditional art and things like that. I would see artists do something, and whether it was painting or drawing, and I was like, I want to do that. But my discovery to 3D just kind of came out of me wanting to give dimension to my graphic design ability.
Oh, fantastic. So you started with Cinema 4D, or you tried different 3D software and then you ended up learning Cinema 4D, and how did you learn it yourself, or you download some tutorials? What happened then?
Yeah, no, I've played with Maya a little bit, but Cinema 4D just really kind of suited me. I mean, there's a lot of different 3D softwares out there, and they're all really good. And, you know, it's really kind of caters to maybe what more specific that you want to do. And for the needs that for what I needed, Cinema 4D really just kind of was the right decision and right choice. You know, it just made my life easier. It had the right tools for a motion designer. So I kind of jumped into that. What was the other part of your question?
Oh, so no, just how did you learn? Like, did you just try different things, or did you download a tutorial? Maybe you bought a book and read a book about it. What was the progress?
No, I hate reading books. Oh man, no, those kind of books are actually okay for me. Informational books. No, I'm kind of all self. I'm a self-taught animator, self-taught 3D artist. So I like jumping in and just kind of exploring. And I really kind of push that to students as well. I was talking about this on a podcast on Monday with a company called Brodeur, and I was talking about the learned experience of like self-learning is like slowly disappearing. It's so easy to find information and show you exactly how to do something that the idea behind trying to discover or solve a problem and failing along that way, but by failing you learn so many other things, you know, that's slowly kind of dissipating, you know, and everyone just like wants a quick answer right then and now. But if you don't fail trying to get it, sometimes you miss the opportunity to learn a whole bunch of different things.
Oh, that's such a great approach, and I totally agree with you. But I feel like this learning mindset is not something that comes to all people naturally. Did you feel like you always had it since you were at school? You always loved trying new things and failing and learning? Or was it something that you kind of pushed yourself towards when you became more of a designer?
Well, yeah, I mean, things that I'm passionate about. If I'm not like interested in it, I just figure out a way to do the bare minimum and pass, you know. But like once I figure out what my passion is, yeah, it's really hard to kind of pry me away from it. And I think lots of artists kind of discover that, you know, which is why, like, you know, growing up, we'll find ourselves like we didn't go to sleep that night because we were like working on a painting or doing some kind of animation, right? And it's just because you're so into it. And that's really like, if you find yourself doing that, it's like, that's the direction you should take your career.
Yeah,
so,
definitely. That, I think I agree. That feeling is amazing when you actually so passionate about that you can't go to sleep and you spend days and nights doing something and then you see the result and this is the most satisfying thing in the world. But I feel like there is also another part or kind of darker side of passion when, because some people, especially creative people, have so many passions, it becomes very difficult to focus on one thing. Did you have that problem when you were starting and you're like, oh, I love 3D, but I like animation, but maybe I like graphic design and typography? Or were you always like, 3D seems like the right thing for me to do, I should progress in that and forget everything else?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I really like drawing and I really like photography. And so that was definitely something that, you know, working on clients, and you work 10-hour days almost every day on client work, and then you really feel kind of burnt out afterwards. And it's like, I don't really have time to draw. I don't really have time to do photography. And then you find yourself just glued to the computer, and it's really hard to kind of get off the computer. So yeah, I've kind of come up with little ways of pushing myself so I can do those things, you know, just for myself.
And you did the 365-day challenge quite recently. Yeah. How did that come about, and how did it go for you?
Yeah, so on Monday, this week marked my, it was 2 years since I finished it up. It was awesome. It was really, really hard, for sure. It was just whatever time I had left in my day, you know. I juggle a handful of different things. I'm a professor. I teach 3D animation at Ringling College of Art and Design. I was creating courses and doing tutorials for Grayscale Gorilla. I've run my own studio, and then on top of that, I was doing the kind of everyday animations or designs for 365 days. Oh my gosh,
you feel like a super busy man.
Yeah, I mean, I love it though. You know, it's I don't feel burnt out. I always feel kind of inspired and passionate, and that's kind of what my driving force is. But out from the 365-day work that I was doing came just. Okay, so I really believe in the 10,000 hour rule, right? And it's the amount of time that you put in, and that makes you climb up to the top, makes you just progress, you know, faster and faster and faster. And so that's kind of what it did for me, right? I'd finish up my other work, my teaching or my freelance work, and then I would work on my personal work before I went to bed. And through this, every month I would give myself a different theme. I've noticed a lot of artists are doing a 365-day or just everyday projects in general, and they're great. But one thing I've noticed that's getting repetitive is a lot of times now it's just like, I'm just going to make something, and it's kind of redundant or repetitive, more of the same thing every day. And so what I tried to do, and this is a good goal, and I urge everyone to try it, is give yourself a different theme every month or every week, and that way you can focus maybe on something a little bit more specific. For me, every month I would give myself a theme, and I would base it around something that I wanted to learn more, be better at. And so I felt my compositions were weak one month. So I was like, okay, this theme for this month, that's all I'm going to focus on. So that's month. I wanted to do color theory and monochromatic color, so that was a theme. It can be technical too. It doesn't have to be like, you know, art principle based. So like one month I wanted to learn a specific piece of software. So I said this month, every animation I do or every design is going to have this piece of software in it. And so just out of that, I remember it was my day 365. The last day, did it every day, but the last day in particular just kind of blew up. And I had old clients emailing me and saying, hey, you know, your last animation's like all over Reddit, and I'm like, oh, really? And so I check it out. I'm like, oh, that's really funny. And just from that point on, it just soared. And I feel like that's just proof that it's all about the time you put in. You can't expect to do great things not putting in that time, because the great artists out there are putting that extra time in. They're going above and beyond. If you look at the great artists out there, their schedules are packed. You know, they're not taking breaks. They're hungry. They're enjoying it. So yeah, the 365-day challenge was awesome.
It's an amazing challenge, and you're right. Lots of artists are taking this challenge, and we interviewed Balgasm, who again he's continuing his challenge every year. But what we've heard a lot, it's not from the first attempt that it actually went well. There were people who tried it for a week or two, and then they gave up because something important came up. And then only from a second attempt, when they actually figure out how to make yourself dedicated enough. Was it easy for you? Did you do it from the first time, or did you have to restart?
It was hard. No, I didn't miss a day. I didn't have to restart. It was more or less, I knew that I would do it before I went to bed. I was traveling to go in different conferences and stuff like that, and after the conference, everyone would get together and hang out late, and I would go back to the hotel room with a laptop and finish it. And I was like, I'm not going to bed until I finish it, you know. It was, I don't know, it was challenging, but not completing it for a day just never even crossed my mind. It was like, no, I have to. This is the goal I set out. It's whatever. I'll lose an hour of sleep tonight or 2 hours of sleep tonight. I'm not going to fail in the process of it. It just never was an option for me.
How long would you spend a day during this project?
I would say on average it was like 3 hours, you know, but it was really kind of what time I had. I mean, some would be an hour, some I did that were 6.
Oh, wow.
But I would say mostly it was like 2 to 3 hours.
And have you ever tried to do like 5 days in one day, and then you have something to post every day, so you don't need to worry about it for a week?
I did that. I did do that, but I did it. What was the reason I did it? I think it was for Christmas or something like that. I was traveling. I think I made like 2 or 3 animations, something like that. But you know what? It's like I ended up making stuff for that day anyways. This is what usually ends up happening for me. If I make something and I don't post it just then, I end up not liking it. And so I create it, and I'm like, cool, I'll save this for next week. And next week comes, and I look at it, and I'm like, I can't post that. I don't like it. I hate that. I looked at it too long, and now I gotta get rid of it, and I make it something new anyway. So I've got a bunch of frames and renders that don't make it out, that I just end up hating. So
well, I totally get it, and I think that's part of this challenge is the fact that you post it, whether you're 100% happy with it or not, you have to post it that day, and that's why I think keeps you away from this perfectionist idea that you need to make it perfect before you can post it. And that's why lots of people work on one artwork for months until they actually show it to public, while the actual purpose of this is learning and pushing yourself.
Yeah.
So what would you say is the most important thing that you've learned throughout this challenge?
Through the like the daily render kind of challenge, I guess I don't know if there's anything specific. It just kind of reconfirmed my thought process that the putting in the time pays off. You know, and I try to tell younger artists, or just artists that are learning or trying to figure it out, what the steps are. And it's like, I always say, when you're done work, go back to work. And that doesn't mean like when you're done your day job, like, no, just sit there in the office and ask what else you can do. It's like, no, like leave and do something for yourself. It's really important, I think, just as a mindset, that you're not just creating work for clients, that you're not just making something when someone's telling you what to make, that, you know, artists are inspired. And that's usually our drive to actually get into this industry. No one's, well, maybe some people, but in my experience, no one's really all that excited to be like, I'm going to go work on client work for the rest of my life. We're usually inspired by just like sitting down and making something personal. You know, that's how it happened all through childhood for me. You know, I would draw something because I wanted to draw it, not because someone was forcing me to draw it. And for me now, after the 365-day challenge, it's just kind of like reconfirm that it's like, no, that is the right process. Like, set time aside to get your own creative process out and not just work for clients all the time.
I can see lots of people agreeing with what you're saying and sending lots of hearts. I feel like this is a common challenge to lots of people.
Feeling the love.
Yeah, when you have a day job. So what day job did you have when you were just starting out? Were you a graphic designer? Were you doing something else?
So I was the only one in my department who had a motion reel when I graduated. So I really wanted to do animation in 3D. The only problem was I don't think I was all that great, you know, because I was self-taught 3D artist, self-taught animator, like we were talking about, and my strength really came in from my design. I got hired at a 3D studio, and they were using Maya. They weren't even using Cinema 4D, and so they were pretty reluctant, I think, of having me be a 3D artist. And so I was putting together kind of like a lot of design decks and a lot of pitch decks and doing a lot of stuff that I really kind of hated. And like something that I didn't want to do, you know, I was like, oh, I want to do 3D and I want to, and they're like, but you're a good designer, so can you just do this for us? And it's like, oh man, this is so boring and I really don't want to do this. So what I did was start working on my own personal 3D animations, right? And it always comes full circle to doing your own personal work. And I went to the Jason White, his name is, he owns Leviathan, and I went to Jason and I said, hey, I was working on this 3D animation. I was wondering if you wanted to like check it out, maybe like give me a review on it. And he's like, oh, I didn't know like you did 3D animation, like they just forgot, you know. And he saw it and he really liked it, and he's like, oh, okay. And so a couple small little 3D projects came in, and I remember him coming up to me and saying, hey, you want to take this on? And it all came once again from me saying, you know what, like this is my passion, and it resonates with other people. They see that you're passionate. It's like, okay, if this kid is going to go home at night and do a 3D animation just to show me that he likes it, like we should kind of, you know, feed into that a little bit and kind of nurture that.
Oh, yeah.
So,
oh, that's such a great story, and always good to have that someone like a mentor next to you who will notice your talent. And I think just knowing that someone thinks your work is great kind of keeps you doing what you love. It's always good to have this extra feedback and someone believing in you from the professional world, and that gives you that extra boost. Oh, fantastic.
Right, it feels good.
Yeah, I remember.
It's like a reason to keep going.
I know, and definitely, I agree with what you just said about doing something extra at work and showing it to people at work is super important. I remember when I worked in agency world, I would do little cartoons about every day because I was so bored doing like really boring advertising work that I would do a cartoon about how boring was my day, and I would just pin them to the wall next to me, and then different creative directors and art directors would come and it's like, oh, what is that? This is really cool. And that,
see, that's the mentality.
And it wasn't because, again, I think my story was a bit different because I didn't want to become an illustrator. I just wanted to do something extra and show that I actually have other skills and I can tell a story. And I think, but for everyone who is listening and watching us, guys, if you're not doing something extra at work, think, what is this little passion project that you can run alongside all the other client work that you're doing, and definitely it will be worth your investment.
For sure. And not just that, but like I bet you there's like other people sitting next to you that would be down to work on a passion project with you too. So if you're like, if you feel stuck or maybe your skills aren't as good somewhere, it's like, well, bring somebody on, you know, bring someone cool on and have them join you.
Yeah, definitely cool. So now you you mentioned so many different things that you do. This is just blowing my mind. So you teach, you run a studio, you run your own projects, you work for clients. So what takes up most of the time, would you say?
My teaching, for sure. I kind of make that my, that was kind of the reason I stopped just full-time working for someone else at a studio, is that I really kind of wanted to bring the industry back to students, back to passionate people who wanted to learn. And I felt like that's kind of what I missed out on through my college experience, was that I felt a lot of my professors didn't actually have current up-to-date industry knowledge. And I was like, you know, if I teach, I want to work on industry projects at the same time and bring that kind of love and passion back into the classroom. So I definitely kind of make that my priority. But with that, right, I think a lot of my success in my teaching is because I'm currently in the industry and my finger's on the pulse. It's like, and I tell my students this, I'm like, I'm not giving you guys 5-year-old information. I'm not even giving you 5-month information. I'm giving you information that is happening right now in the industry, that's happened yesterday or today. And so they kind of go hand in hand. So my freelance work and attending conferences and even having chats like this, you know, I find equally as important, because they kind of both work together for me.
So great to hear. And I totally agree that industry and education should be so much closer together, because exactly as you said, lots of professors who teach at universities haven't worked in the industry for so long that they actually have no clue what's going on. So it's really good that again you teach a lot, but at the same time you do the actual work, so you're always up to date with what's going on and give the most relevant knowledge. Amazing. So
and as you know, like, our industry moves so quick that technology is changing constantly. Like, probably what we were software and programs we were working on 2 years ago might not even be relevant anymore.
Exactly,
you know? So
and it is very difficult like to not to go completely one way or another, because to commit to teaching at university is also a lot of work, because you need to plan your lectures and you need to plan what you're going to teach through the entire year. So it's kind of extra work on top of what you're doing as an artist.
And there's like meetings and like it's like, oh man, I wish I could just teach, you know, but it's like there's all these other things. It's like, oh, you got to attend this and you got to come on this Saturday. It's like, oh man, I just want to teach these guys. You're taking away my time for it.
Exactly, and I suppose there is a lot of writing involved as well. And I think for designers it's especially painful to do a lot of submitting all the research work. I don't know if your university asks to do that, but definitely lots of others do.
Yeah, no, that's definitely kind of like a major university thing. I'm at a private art college, so fortunately, I don't.
That's good. That's good.
Doing any writing.
I agree that the more practical approach definitely the way forward. So with your studio, you mentioned you have a studio. Is it just yourself? Do you have a team in your studio? How is it all set up?
It's just me. Like, I am locked and loading, but how it goes really is it depends on the scope of the project. So, you know, I've got a kind of a net of like some really close friends and just really good artists that I've met or have worked with before. And so when I get a big project in, I'll just shoot them an email and see if they're available. So I've had a handful of projects. I just finished out one that I took on 3 other people. You know, but it's kind of flexible and modular that way. So it's like, does the scope of the project, does the budget of the project have the ability to bring on people, or is that going to be an overload? So,
and what kind of people do you bring on? Someone who has completely different skills from yourself, or maybe someone who can do the same, but you can split the job? Who are those people?
Sometimes I'll take on a producer. You know, I think it's someone who's a producer, it's like a very unappreciated position. And when you work with a good producer, you realize how amazing they are. And so if I have a big project, I don't have the time to do 3D animation and come up with all the concepts and manage the scheduling and handle every other artist and, you know, have conversations with the client about budget and time and when I need them to respond back for feedback, and sometimes it's hard to be the good cop and the bad cop with the client. So I've hired on producers for that. but I would say most of the time I'll hire another animator. I've got a pretty good design shop, so I usually don't hire designers because I kind of like coming up with the art of whatever the project is, kind of the direction. But I like hiring animators, whether it's 3D or 2D. So that's usually who I look for.
And producers definitely such a huge part of any creative work. And I think depending on the industry, they could be called producers, project managers, and lots of other things. Basically, the person who's in charge of everything else that you don't want to be in charge of when you're doing creative work. So do you have like a one person that you always work with? Do you have like, I don't know, a set of 10 people that depending who's available, you go to them?
Oh yeah, I've got a bunch of people. There's no like specific like person, like the minute the project comes in, I'm going to them, or when they get one, they're coming to me. It's really, I send a mass thing out. It's usually last minute too. It's really hard. I mean, you know, our industry, it's like, you know, when something comes in, it's like, oh, and we're going to start in like 2 days. And you're like, oh man, I got to find a really fantastic artist that's available in 2 days. So yes, it can be challenging.
And how did you find those people first time? Like, were you, I don't know, put a job offer somewhere, or were you just asking people around?
It was people that I had worked with before. You know, for me, it's like if I'm going to get into a project with somebody, like I want to know that I like them, you know. I want to, like, I tell my students this too, like before like being a great artist or designer or animator, like you got to be a cool person. You know, like seriously, I'm like, that's way more important to me than anything else. Like if I'm going to work with you for 8 to 10 hours every day, like you got to be chill, like you got to be like cool to hang out with, like, because that's what you're doing, you know. And so I'm like, be a cool person. So most everyone that I hire is people that I've worked with before. But I've been doing a lot of like art conferences and stuff like that, and different tech conferences, and so I'll meet just brilliant artists through there, and get all new kind of connections through that too. You know, because it's like hangout conversation, and you learn more about their personality, and it's like, okay, I could hang on the phone with you all day long. Like we could do this.
Brilliant. I think this is the best advice I've ever had. Just be a cool person. I think you definitely, every design course should start with how to be a cool person, so people want to work with you. People are actually asking questions, and by the way, guys, don't be afraid to ask questions. This is all about having a conversation, and if you want ask David anything, please do. So the first question is, how do you see yourself developing or impacting the field in the future?
How do I see myself developing in what in the future?
And impacting the field. I assume the field of 3D or design in general.
Sure. Yeah. You know, I kind of approach every day with a clean slate. I've grown into having a particular style, and those who follow me and see my work on Instagram, it's kind of a very particular thing. It's kind of usually a little weird, a little gross, a little alien, creepy, right? And I'm like, you know, I could do all different styles. Like I've been doing this forever. You know, it's like I've only been doing these weird things for a couple of years now. So like I try to mix it up. Like I did one that was like kind of like this like retro 80s theme. It's like you know, we're designers, so how do you evolve that way? You know, I like to see what the future holds. I think you know, different like VR and AR, MR, you know, those are definitely things to keep your eyes on. I would say particularly AR or MR. VR is great. It's a little secluded, and it's really probably best as I see it right now for like video games and stuff like that. But augmented reality, something that you're fully immersed in, I see as kind of the future. And I mean, you even see companies like Apple, like they're putting all their eggs in one basket for that, you know. And it's like you can kind of see already the big tech companies and where they're looking at. And even what Google Glass was doing, that was several years ago now, right? But it was not like confined. It was like, no, it's a visual experience as you go through life, and the graphics that are incorporated within that. So I see that kind of as a really big thing. How do I see myself fitting into that? I don't know, man. I just want to keep making cool stuff. But what's interesting is like I don't make things for other people. I make them for myself, and then And I heard this somewhere. I forget what artist said it, but they said art is once you release art, it's no longer yours. It's for everyone else's to decide what it is. And so I don't know. You know, I think just being passionate and keep exploring and experimenting. I think you're going to create things that people haven't seen before, and thus inspiring new people and kind of creating that new wave, that new thing that people want to do. And by that, that would be impacting the industry that we're in.
It's just so great to hear your thoughts on this, and especially because I feel like you're already impacting the industry a lot by inspiring lots of designers, and there are so many people who follow your art, and I assume studying the 3D and going into the field because they see the possibilities of it and they see your passion behind it. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to see what will you do with the new technologies. And again, you mentioned mixed reality and augmented reality, and I feel like your work kind of always looked like it is, like, especially I've seen like one particular, I suppose, month was about interacting with the real world, so it was more like objects and these creatures in the real world, which always look like could be an augmented reality thing. You mentioned about your styling, kind of the things that you do. It's a good question. Why did you decide to do these weird things? Like, why that? Why not something else?
I don't know. I'm a weirdo, I guess. No, I don't. I really don't know. It's just like I like letting my mind wander. And it's just.
Do they mean anything? Is it like inspired by something, or supposed to look like something? Is it alien world? What is it?
Yeah, you know what's interesting is I get a lot of my inspiration from nature, and I really try to make that the main thing that I get inspired by, because you know, I think a lot of artists pull from nature, and I like to say look at nature through different lenses. You know, if you look at leaves and you look at thousands of them on one tree from a distance away, has a totally different meaning than if you pluck one leaf off of that and hold it away from your face. And that's got a totally different view than if you get a macro lens on a camera and shoot the leaf, right? Now you're seeing like the texture and you're seeing like the little veins in it. And then if you put that leaf under a microscope, now you're seeing the cells that build up that leaf. And that's the world I dove into. You know, it's like, I'm like, okay, what if I looked at everything through a microscope? And so I feel like a lot of the things that I'm doing are really based on real things that are under a microscope, you know, and then I just kind of give them a little twist. And so it's kind of got this natural feel to it that I feel like viewers are connecting to, because it's like, it could exist, but it's definitely fake, you know. And I don't know, I just had a really fun kind of doing that exploration, and from that I've just kind of stuck with it because I'm having so much fun.
Oh, it looks incredible, and I can see how it kind of nature, but maybe a bit futuristic, but again, nature changed throughout the evolution, so it will look like that in 100 years. Yeah, it's definitely a lot of inspiration we can take from what nature already has to offer to us. So it's very good to see kind of your take on that. We have more questions from our lovely viewers today. So even though so many of your projects are completely diverse and surreal, your appeal to natural modeling and shape is spectacular. I think this is just a comment. People are loving your work. What are your thoughts on future rendering?
Thoughts on future rendering? Well, I mean, I see it all as GPU based. I mean, that's what my machines are all hooked up to right now. I don't want to get too techie nerdy into it. Feel free to just hit me up with a direct message if you're like into that nerdy tech stuff, and I'll try to keep up. But yeah, went from CPU to GPU. You know, it's all going to be cloud-based rendering. You see the big tech companies again, like Google building a massive farm, Otoy's building kind of their own kind of cloud-based, more or less setup. So yeah, I mean, it looks like we're going to be tapping into every GPU and every processor that everyone has in the world to kind of render things. That's what it looks like right now, right? Like they're looking at, hey, we could tap into people's phones and use that to render. When you're sleeping at night, you know, you can get paid to put your phone on this ability to render stuff, and someone will be utilizing that when you're sleeping, things like that. That's kind of the future. I mean, it's going to be instantaneous. You know, that's kind of the process that we see through them right now, is everything is just getting quicker and quicker, and we need them real time, right? Because we're just talking about things like AR and VR, which are all real time. And so if you want something in augmented reality, but you want to have it like lifelike quality, lifelike rendering, then now you need really fast rendering ability for that, you know? So
great. Yeah, I think it's always the technology or the progress goes the way to make sure that people can do what they want to do and what they love doing. And I think, rendering right now, the speed of it and the equipment is the biggest problem for most of the artists. So definitely, I think it will go that way very soon, when it will be very quick and easy.
Oh, yeah.
We have more questions from our viewers.
Sweet, I love them.
Yeah, they're very active. Love the audience today. How to stand out from the rest as an artist? That's the current struggle for many artists. I think it's a great question, because I feel like, especially with 3D, there are so many very similar types of work online now. So how do you stand out?
Well, yeah, it's a challenging question, because I don't know if I have the answer necessarily, other than just kind of repeating some things that I've kind of like gone over already, which is like, don't look at other artists' work for your only source of inspiration. You know, that's the most obvious, right? Your work is probably going to look like mine if you're just looking at my work to be inspired to create something for you. Now, it's a good lesson to learn, maybe to look at my work and be like, oh, how did he make that? I'm going to make the exact same thing, or see how close I can get. But when you put that out there, then it just looks like you copied somebody else, and it's unoriginal, and who wants to hire someone who's just copying someone else's work? And I see this happening to all artists out there right now. Probably the top 10 or 20 biggest artists out there currently posting lots of work are just duplicated over and over and over again by other artists, which is great, you know, which is awesome. It's flattering that people are inspired by artists' work, and I'm sure all the artists feel that way. But if you want to stand out, you know, you look at other things, right? So, which is why I said I really like to kind of look at nature. Because, you know, an argument could be made that all things would then be derived from nature. All inspiration is derived from nature. So if you look at it, though, it can be your own original take on it. Put your own original twist on what you're seeing outside, you know. I think things get diluted. I remember I was doing a drawing one time, and I was looking at another artist's drawing of what they drew, right? It was a portrait of someone. And instead of looking at the actual picture of the person, I was looking at another artist drawing, and I remember a guy came up to me, and he's like, you know, like, you should just look at the picture of the person, not someone else's drawing, because like theirs has imperfections or their own unique take on it, and now you're just going to be copying that, right? As opposed to figuring out what your unique way of interpreting the picture would be. And it clicked with me, and I was pretty young at the time, and I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Why am I looking at someone else's drawing? I should be looking at the actual person. So I don't know if you're feeling like you need to stand out more. You know, maybe don't look at anyone else's work. You know, come up with your own inspiration. Go out with a camera. You know, go outside with a camera, walk around whatever city you live in, whatever town, doesn't matter. You know, nature's beautiful, architecture is beautiful, and have that be, you know, what sparks your own creation.
And I think for going on from this question to like particular how to create a new style, and because I think inspiration is a very broad thing. I agree, you can get inspiration from lots of different places, but how to create a very particular style of artwork out of it, I think it's a very certain mindset, again, you need to have as a designer when you look at things. So do you have any specific process of coming up with a new style? Maybe, I don't know, trying paint and then, I don't know, mixing everything, or doing one day when you don't use any tools that you usually use, or something like that, that actually is more technical rather than inspirational?
No, yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it, right? It's kind of like, maybe try mixed medium, right? It's like, okay, I don't really see any artists mixing paint within their 3D work, right? And that's like a really nice way of like maybe getting a totally different texture on a 3D object, scanning that paint in and bringing that on. You know, these are things that aren't really happening all that much, right? Those are definitely ways. You see when new technology comes out, like projection mapping blew up for a while, right? And all we're doing now is taking a 3D rendering and projecting it onto a multifaceted surface, and we're like, woo, that's awesome, you know? It's like brand new, and it's like, all right, yeah, I mean, it's just a new spin on it, sure. It's like, but so I don't know. Sometimes it doesn't have to be all that big of a jump. It's just interpreting something in a different way. I remember when I first saw somebody projection map onto like a fog machine, and the fog was coming out. I was like, oh man, that's so bad. And then someone was projection mapping onto like a waterfall
really
or something
cool,
like that. I'm like, right? And I'm like, okay, so now we're changing it from buildings to something more organic, and now that's something new again. So I don't know, find something that you love and come up with like a riff off of that, right? And put your own spin on it.
Definitely. I think I love the example that you gave, because exactly that what happened. I think the projection mapping has been there for so long, and then suddenly someone decided to start putting on different object, and again it's like, whoa, this is a completely new thing. I remember first time I saw the projection mapping on the water, and I was like, oh, it's almost 3D, it's like so cool. But technically it's nothing new. So definitely I think experimenting and just not expecting a certain outcome is a good way to find something new. More questions from lovely people out here.
Awesome.
I'm working in freelance 3D modeling, and I haven't taken any real classes, but I want to know, what's the next real step for a future 3D designer or animator? I assume when you achieve certain kind of level of mastery, how do you jump to the next level?
So like, you know, I guess I would like ask a couple questions back, but without knowing that, like things that I would think of is like, well, how old are you? Are you planning on getting formal education for it? Do you just want to jump in and work? Do you already have formal education in something else, and you this is your passion, and you just want to like be self teaching and learn 3D and just go right into the industry?
I think from
those would be questions.
I can see that. So this person is a freelance 3D modeling, so they're already working. They didn't have any formal education, only some tutorials, I would assume, and now they want a next step. So without any formal training, already working in the industry, what's the next step?
You know, what I noticed for me is it can be really hard jumping into the industry just as a freelancer. And because it has a lot to do with your connections. I mean, you asked me a question earlier of like how I hire people, and I said, well, it's because I've either worked with them or I've met them at a conference or something like that. And so I would say the same thing to that person. Hey, if you want to take it to the next level, see if you can get hired at a studio that you like, right? And it doesn't have to be the biggest or best studio in the world, right? It's just something to get your foot in the door. Go to these conferences, meet people, say, hey, this is what I do. Hang out with them, get a beer with them, talk with them, right? Things like that, right?
The power of networking,
cool.
yes.
Yeah, and one thing leads to the next. It really does. And so I feel like if you feel like you've hit a plateau as a freelancer, just kind of working in your own personal environment, kind of secluded, you got to immerse yourself into the industry to get noticed. And then from there, you know, I've been contacted by friends numerous times saying, hey, I got this one job, I can't take it, would you like it? It's like, perfect. And I would only know them because I either met them at a conference or I worked with them for a couple of years.
Oh, I think that's a great advice, and I would agree that when you're freelance, there are so many good things about being independent, but working in the studio and working in a kind of more team environment definitely gives you other opportunities to learn, to meet people, to work on projects that you wouldn't get on your own as a freelancer. So I agree, that's a great advice. I think we'll take the last question before we let you go, because I know you have a busy day and millions of different things you need to do. So the question is, how to work in design production studios, such as Mill and others, if you never have worked in any studio, because they usually want someone with experience.
For sure. I mean, it's hard, you know, when you see like the job listing and it's asking you for 3 to 5 year experience or 5 to 10 year experience, and it's listing 30 different softwares that you've never even touched, and it's asking for a big portfolio. And like the Mill's a perfect example. just because they're so massive, right? It's really hard to get your foot in the door. I mean, but that's for anybody, right? And so what companies are doing right now, hate it or love it, they really want to hire interns. And out of that, through the internship, they want to discover if you're cool to work with, how talented you are, what your strengths are, if they could use you, are you creating style frames, can you bring in work for them? Like they want to know all that stuff just right before they hire you. So lots of them are doing like internships or apprenticeships that have the opportunity at the end of them to get hired full time. You know, I would have a unique answer depending on every artist's ability. You know, some artists are just amazing and they really don't have much work experience, and it's like I would recommend that you don't take an internship. Like they should just hire you. Like say you'll freelance with them for a week or something like that. Like don't take $10 an hour or work for free, which is total crap. I don't believe in that. Don't like do that if you already have like some kind of experience. So I don't know. I think artists are really easy to get pushed around because like in the back of our heads it's like we do this because we love to do this, you know, and like fine, like oh what a great opportunity to work at, like I mean just since we're talking about the mill, I'll just use them. What a great opportunity to work at the mill, I'll just do it for free, you know, because of the opportunity and the experience. It's like no man, experience doesn't pay the bills, you know, like get paid, like stand up for what you're worth, like say it. And so every artist though like that asked me that question, I would have a different answer for based on their age, if they've gone to school, if they're, you know, like what their work looks like. Are you just like a designer or an illustrator that wants to do 3D now? Like the steps are going to be kind of a different process, but that's kind of the process the industry is asking for right now, which is do an internship with us, hang out, let us see that you can do this and handle it and good at communicating, fun person to be around, great artist, and then we'll hire you, hopefully.
Yeah, I think the creative world now is very tough, but I think what you're doing is also very interesting, like running your Instagram, having tutorials and other things. Do you feel like that definitely helped you to get more clients and more potential interesting projects from agencies as well? Would you recommend people to go social to maybe find, to be noticed as well?
Sure, hell yeah. Like some of my favorite artists out there, like I've never worked with them, never heard of them before I saw their work, and I was like, their work is so cool that like I want to be friends with them. You know what I mean? And that's just like self-promotional. So this is actually a great way to kind of wrap it up too, is that it goes full circle back to personal work. Personal work is so important. You got to be doing that stuff. That is what is going to get you noticed. It's very rare that a client comes up to me and they're like, hey, you know the title sequence you did for the show on Stars? Can you make us something? It's always like, hey, you know that really weird, gross thing that you made? Can you make us a logo? And it's like, there's no connection, but the connection is that like the creativity, they see a creativity of the personal work and they're like, can you do something for us? And it's like, yeah. So like, I just want to reinforce personal work and go out and crush it, and don't make excuses for why you can't. Just do it, you know.
Such a great note to finish our conversation today with. Thank you so much, David. It was such a pleasure talking to you. Guys, be like David.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Do personal work and inspire other people. Thank you from not so sunny London to sunny Florida. And
yes.
Good luck with all your work. We'll keep following you. Lots of love. And thanks, guys, for joining us and asking all your questions.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Yeah, thanks for having me, and I hope to chat with you guys again.
Cheers.